start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And so if anyone who's participating, I'll just make sure that they're muted.
Give me just a second, Shaylin, to get it live on YouTube.
Oh, we're not up yet? Sorry, Leah. I saw the recording button go up and I thought we were on. All right, so now we're live and we'll go ahead and officially get started. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And I've asked Commissioner Wilcox to offer a thought or legislative prayer, and so I will turn the time over to her.
Welcome, everyone. I just want to, this is just short and sweet, but as you're sitting here, I want you to think of a problem. One that is like 7 + 2 = 9. That works, but also does 6 + 3, and so does 1 + 8, and so does 5 + 4, and a lot of different combinations. There are many ways to look at things. The way you look at things is not always the only way you can do them. We need to respect other people's way of thinking and their opinions. One of the most sincere forms of respect is sincerely listening to what others have to say. I have been very impressed with this commission. We have very differing points at times and views and opinions, but we have always been respectful to each other. And I find that very admirable and that we can get along. With everything going on in this world, it's nice to have such great examples of respect. In the words of Maya Angelou, if we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die. Just a nice click that we just need to have respect for each other and other opinions, but keep it civil and stuff like that. And I'll just say a quick prayer. Dearly Father, we are so grateful for this time to meet together as a commission, and bless that we will be able to take in consideration everything that is going on and what will be best for this city, and bless everyone's health, that with the COVID going on, that we will be blessed and everyone will be better in all that they do. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thanks so much. Great thought. Okay, moving right into our agenda items. First up, we have an administrative decision involving a conditional use permit extension for Centerpoint Theater. So I will turn the time over to staff.
Okay, thank you, Chair Heyman and members of the commission. So this item was seen earlier this summer, and the applicant has asked for an extension, as some of you foresaw. So this is Centerpoint Theater. They're doing their concerts in the parking lot and they have been a success. However, the pandemic is not easing as they had anticipated. And so they have asked for an extension until October 26th with the same rules as applied before. They provided a new parking map just so that you can see that they have full emergency access around the building. And the only other change is that they are adding some speakers because not all cars can run the radio without having the car on. So they're going to add a couple of speakers, but it shouldn't change much to the request.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Any questions for staff? Seeing none. Oh,
I have a quick question.
go ahead.
So Mackenzie, go ahead, Becky.
Kevin, I think yours is delayed for some reason. Like you keep jumping in and then I'm so sorry.
Am I super laggy? Maybe I need to figure that out. Okay. Go ahead, Becky. I'll be right back.
I just had a quick question about the speakers. That's not going to interfere with, with this, will this allow us to give them the option to still be like past the 10 o'clock? What's our quiet time thing?
So they have still kept to their 10 o'clock in their request letter. They still plan on being done by 10 p.m. So that doesn't really change anything. The noise ordinance has a 9 p.m. curfew, but that is for construction and really loud, very specific uses, power equipment, construction, loading, garbage. That's the 9 p.m. cutoff for our noise ordinance. But they are still sticking to a 10 p.m. cutoff time.
Okay, so that I just want to make sure that they're safe so that like neighboring places won't, you know, be mad that they're past 9 p.m. It doesn't affect with the noise ordinance. It's not in effect with that.
That's correct. Yes.
great.
And I retyped up the suggested motion again, specifying that 10 p.m. Because this is a conditional use permit. That is one thing. If there is noise involved in a conditional use, you can put stipulations on that noise as well. So hence that 10 p.m. curfew. So the main thing is the adjoining residential is on the other side of the building. And so all the noise will go towards the road rather than towards any residential.
Great, thank you.
Kevin, are you back with us? You're up, my friend.
I think so. Am I, is that better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Great. So I was just going to ask, and sorry if I missed this while I was out, but the speakers have not been installed yet. They're planning on doing that?
That's correct. And that's my understanding of it. The applicant could speak more to that.
Okay.
Different than I know.
Okay, second kind of related question, I guess. There haven't been any complaints about any of the activities that they've already had, have there?
No, I've checked with Corey as well, and we haven't received any complaints.
Okay, great, thanks.
Welcome.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll take this opportunity to invite the applicant to I always say step forward. That's not really appropriate via Zoom. The applicant can pop up their video at this point. Let's see.
Join via video.
Join via video. There we go. We'll invite the applicant to join. I like that. We'll invite the applicant to join via video. There we go. And if you will just, I know we've seen you before, but if you'll just introduce yourself for us for the record.
Sure. I'm Jansen Davis. I'm the Executive Director of Centerpoint Legacy Theater in Centerville. Maybe a quick reference to Kevin's question. We did add some speakers into the mix because we were running into the problems that we addressed. Again, so there has been some support from some loudspeakers during that period of time, but we keep it within that space that we're in. And so it was really just to help support those vehicles not being able to hear through the regular FM as we planned. We have not had any problems as far as complaints that I'm aware. And like it says, we're done by that 10 o'clock period, and works out pretty good. Probably the biggest problem we dealt with was heat. So we had to push some of those performances a little bit later in the afternoon so it wasn't so hot for the folks in their cars.
Thanks. Any question for the applicant?
So I have a question. This is something I sort of mentioned last time. Are you sure you only want to go through October?
That was the
I know
that was
the
the
heat
comment.
might be an issue now, and cold might be an issue later, but I'm just wondering the reasoning behind October.
So this is a little bit longer than we hope that we will need. Certainly, the outdoors does pose some problems when it gets colder as well. So we're hoping that we can make some adjustments so that we can move inside regardless of what the restrictions are at that point. We think that we can go ahead and offer some inside activities, even with some strict restrictions. It'll change some things. We're still working on that. So we feel like that this will take us through at least what we need this year as far as outdoors.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Nope, seeing none. Thank you very much. We'll invite you to non-video. We'll invite you to non-appear via video. Okay, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to open a public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to provide a comment to speak. We have a few enough people listed in our list of participants that I think for today, if you'd like to provide a comment, we would invite you to participate via video, and then I'll just call on people as they pop up. I'll pause for a second to give anyone who wants to speak that opportunity. And seeing no one stepping forward, we'll close the public hearing. Any further questions for staff? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. I make a motion to for the Planning Commission to approve the conditional use permit extension request for Centerpoint Legacy Theater at 525 North, 400 West, subject to conditions 1 through 6 in the staff report, with suggested reasons for action A through C in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If
Yeah,
not,
I just want to
go ahead.
quickly say that I appreciate, I know it's been difficult for entertainment businesses throughout the world right now, but I appreciate that our local community theater has stepped up to both continue as much as they could, but keep patrons and performers safe. I know other theaters have not chosen to do that. And, you know, as the applicant mentioned, we'll see how they'll be creative in finding solutions for the future. But I do appreciate that they've been able to really take this seriously, but also take their role in our community seriously and find that balance that I think was needed. So I just want to say I fully support this CUP and the previous actions that they've done.
Thanks. With that, we'll go ahead and we'll take a roll call vote. We'll start with you, Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr,
Aye.
and myself is an aye as well. So the motion passes. Thank you guys very much. Moving right along to the second item on our agenda. So this one, we're looking at a final site plan for Bank of America. This is an administrative decision, and I will turn the time over to staff.
Who might still be muted?
It wasn't letting me unmute for a
Oh,
minute.
there we go.
Okay, this is not been too long since you've last seen this. This is the former Iggy site, and we have moved to the next step is the final site plan, as you mentioned. Just 3 points to discuss from the staff report. The first one is I did go to the city's redevelopment agency. I didn't physically attend, but I did go to the recorded Zoom meeting and listened up on what was discussed with the directors. Much of the conversation was centered around the eventual double left. It'll be northbound. So you're eastbound heading northbound to Marketplace, and what that would do to the potential island parcel site. It looks like from the city engineer, the majority of the effect would be along the Parish Lane frontage and the radius turning to Marketplace. So that's where some widening would take place. If you're familiar with the site now, you know on the corner we have that decorative landscape wall and the plantings that are associated with it. It looks like the majority of that will disappear from the site with the expansion, and it'll move the northern boundary further north, partly into the current landscaped area. So what the plans appear from staff is that they'll leave most of the plantings in until that takes place, which we anticipate will be potentially a couple of years. But if you notice in the middle of the site, they're going to add some new planters and some landscape walls that frame the pedestrian walk that leads to the Bank of America. And much of that's going to stay likely under the scenario. They've also upgraded that crosswalk section through their parking lot. They'll also add some bollard lighting, pedestrian lighting, similar to some of the bollard lighting that's existing on the site. And that will be kind of the, not only the pedestrian amenities, but also the replacement of the feature if and when that wall goes away on the corner. One of the concerns Bank of America provided is that they are a financial institution. So the idea of trying to put in fire pits like the Iggy's restaurant is not something they're comfortable with. They don't mind a bench or something of that nature, but gathering in front of the financial institution was a security concern for them. And so I think that leads to one of the points in the staff report is they needed to address the pedestrian amenities. And so one of the findings that the commission needs to make under the Parish Lane Design Guidelines is if this meets that pedestrian enhancement criteria. The second item to bring up was the architecture. They did submit the storyboard now, and that should be in your packet as well as what you see on the screen. There's two components to the architecture. One of them staff mentioned in the conceptual site plan is the vertical and horizontal articulation. That's really designed for large buildings in the Parish Lane Gateway. This is not a large building, but they do have some of the articulation occurring to this small building, as you can see from the storyboard. The second aspect that's more into the shall requirement is the enhancements of canopies, features, walls, things that upgrade the architecture of the building, that enhance the appearance of the building. So your colors, your materials, your features. There's a minimum percentage requirement. I think the ordinance is the primary facade is like 25%, secondary facades is 15%, and remaining facades is 5%. The application that we received didn't call out those percentages. We think that they're probably likely there on the percentages. So if you're acceptable to this design that they proposed, if you move it forward, we've recommended that the building permit address those percentages for verification of compliance with the shall. And we can do that if the commission's so willing to allow us to do that. And if there's any disputes, obviously it would come back to the commission first because you do have to make that subjective call. But from our standpoint, you should see mostly green on our report from the conceptual site plan. They addressed a majority of the stuff and that you expected, and we think it is substantially compliant with the ordinances and expectations. So we did make a recommendation to approve.
Thanks, Corey. Does anyone have any questions for staff? I will say I had one question for you, Corey, with regards to compliance with the Parish Lane guidelines. If you think about the Parish Lane corridor, most of the buildings there are sort of tannish in color. And here, when I look at that storyboard, the brick, well, the rock facing that they've proposed to put in certainly looks like it meets that, but there is an awful lot of gray in that storyboard, particularly on the north and the east sides in a real unbroken kind of way. Is that compliant with the Parish Lane design guidelines, that color scheme?
Well, you didn't let me down, and I figured some of that discussion would take place. The Parish Lane Design Guidelines talk about a very subjective language about harmonious with the surrounding development. And so you do have ability to take a look at the color choices and selections and evaluate it. Yes, most of the Parish Lane area does have those warm tone type colors, as we call them, associated. And even the building that's the dentist office has more of that warm color. But if you also look at across the street, now 7-Eleven was not built under the Parish Lane Design Guidelines, but In-N-Out Burger was built under the Parish Lane Design Guidelines. And so when you look at some of the cool tones, so you're talking about the gray, you could include the white. If you think about blues, those are some of the cool tones. And over at the MTC, you have a substantial amount of gray being used. So staff looked at the gray at the MTC and the white of the 7-Eleven and the In-N-Out Burger and determined that it fits in with the immediate area. So that word harmonious now is being interpreted. You certainly could look at it different and say, well, the dentist office has the warm colors, and should we be doing that? But I don't think the ordinance clarifies whether they're cool tones or whether they're warm tones. It's more of what's compatible with the area. And one of those conflicts that the Planning Commission historically has called out is when they use just primary colors, the primary yellow, primary blues, and red. And so from our standpoint, yeah, we saw the same thing, but we think, for lack of better terms, the cliche, there's a mixed bag in the area, so it's harmonious from our point of view.
Corey, can you remind us, do the words muted tones? I thought that was some of the words that are in the ordinance too, right?
I don't recall of muted. We've used that in the past on conditions of development.
Okay.
But I could take a look while you're debating.
Or Lisa, you can pop up and help us.
Yeah, I remember that in some of our other previous approvals, but I just searched muted under the zoning code and it didn't come up. Now, I will say the search term on the municipal code isn't always accurate, but the language that does say is in the storyboard. It says the storyboard material should harmonize with existing surrounding development. So I think maybe perhaps the muted was further up along Parish Lane where we had new development. And you know, the muted tones are what were approved and harmonious up there, but obviously this is a different sector of the Parish Lane Gateway area. So.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
with Lisa. Muted is something we've invented in the other approvals, but I don't believe the code language says muted.
Well, either way, I was just wondering to see if that would justify supporting this, because in my mind, you know, tans and grays and creams are all muted, whether it's a cool muted or a warm muted. But I do think having the language of harmonious is pretty key there. So thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not, we will invite the applicant. I'm assuming that Mr. Malmberg is the applicant, so I'm not going to invite you to pop up on video to join via video. But if you'll go ahead and just introduce yourself for us.
I am one of the applicants, I guess. Gensler is the actual applicant. Orlando Taylor with Gensler is the applicant. My name is Eric Malmberg with Anderson, Wallen and Associates. I kind of represent the local applicant. Our offices, I'm the civil engineer on the project. We have a local presence here in Salt Lake. And Orlando, are you on the conversation?
I am. Good evening, everyone.
And Mr. Taylor, if you'll just identify yourself for the record as well.
Sure. I'm Orlando Taylor with Gensler Architecture in Phoenix, Arizona.
Thank you.
So we're just happy to to be on the agenda. Thank you for having us, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. We just are pleased to be on the agenda and that we are able to address any of the questions that you guys might have for us.
Any questions for the applicant?
So I, first of all, just want to make a comment that I appreciate all of the additional landscaping and pedestrian walkway enhancements that you've made. So well done there. I'm wondering the decision not to move the sidewalk back. I know we kind of mentioned that on the first time that we talked with you about the potential of, you know, planning ahead. I feel like you're planning ahead maybe a little bit with the plantings, but I'm just wondering if there was a decision, why there was not a decision to move that sidewalk closer to the bank so that in the future it might not become an issue.
Orlando, I can step in on that for you.
Go ahead.
That's a state controlled road and they require the sidewalk at back of curb.
Really?
Yeah, that's a UDOT design. And so that sidewalk will be moved with the expansion to back of curb again into the future.
And will UDOT take care of that?
UDOT owns it, but the city actually regulates the use of the sidewalk and the park strips if there is any.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Any other questions for the applicant? So I'll ask my question, and it relates to the color scheme, the harmonious. What was your thinking with regard to the gray? There's a significant amount of gray in your background or in your color
Sure.
scheme, and I recognize that harmonious that's a subjective term. But what was your thinking with regard to the gray there?
Exactly. Well, thanks for the question. What we've intended to do with not just this project, but a multitude of bank prototype projects throughout the region, throughout the areas, we're trying to create this contemporary flow that fits within certain demographics and certain locations such as the Centerville. So we took that approach and looked at the surrounding conditions and felt like Corey most eloquently stated that it fits within the surrounding areas that we've provided. So we're trying to just kind of give that more contemporary look and feel.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicants? If not, we will take this opportunity to open the public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to speak on this matter to step forward and we would invite you to join via Zoom. Again, we have so few people listed on our participants list today that I'll just pause for a second and see if anyone would like to participate by joining via video.
I would, Your Honor.
Great. If you could just state your name for us and your city of residence, please.
Sure. Thomas Peters. I'm a resident in Holiday, Utah. I'm actually the attorney for the property owner, Deerwood Investments Utah LLC. And obviously we support the application, but more I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the City Council and Commission, as well as the staff that has worked so closely and well with the architects and civil engineer of Bank of America. So it's more just a thank you and recognition of everyone's hard work to get to this point. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them, but that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'll pause for just one more minute to allow anyone who wishes to speak to participate via video. And seeing no one, we'll go ahead and we'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much. Any further questions and I'll just invite the applicants, and if you're not a commissioner, if you'll please just close your video. Perfect. Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, discussion and debate on this one. I'm going to lean out on this because you guys know I am very picky when it comes to colors. I mean, we all know the quick quack car wash discussion. And
We were all picky on that.
I know. And when I think about what is harmonious in that area, the thing that struck me the most looking at that storyboard was just the unrelenting dark gray. And I really worry that that really is not harmonious with that area. The vast majority of buildings surrounding it, including the one in the same island, has much more of the warm tones to it. And while I know that there is the MTC, that's in a very different type of building, an incredibly different type of building. And I don't know that I want to necessarily try to match it to the 7-Eleven, which doesn't comply with the Parish Lane design guidelines. So I personally don't have any problem with the white, and I like the Brit or the rock on it. I think that that all is very consistent, but I'm having a really hard time getting on board with the gray.
So I think this is an interesting conversation because I remember when we were looking at the Randall Brothers gas station that came before us just a little bit ago. I don't think we approved their gray. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that didn't feel harmonious, but part of that was because it was a big gray mass on the top and it was surrounding it. So part of me feels like it would be a little bit hypocritical to say then, oh yeah, we can improve a ton of gray, but I'm also looking at it from like where in the project it was, facing. So that top one was this huge, long, you see it from a distance type of thing. Would you, so Shaylin, would you feel more comfortable if maybe the applicant either like some of that one side has lots of rock and maybe like put a little bit more rock on one side that doesn't have the overhang or something, or maybe choosing a like slightly lighter gray, or what's the issue, do you think?
It's hard to say without seeing it. The unrelenting darker gray did give me pause. I mean, we also on the quick quack car wash, you'll remember, that was another concern that we had. Their color scheme was gray and yellow and green. And they ultimately put it through with sort of the tan color. And I thought that made it look very cohesive with the Parish Lane. So yeah, I worry about it a little less. Like, so Corey, this part here, like the little bit of gray, it looks more like an accent to me. But if you turn it onto the east and the north side, it's pretty significantly gray.
You can't really see it because of, if you want to just scoot out a little bit, Corey.
Yeah. And guys, I recognize that this one is a subjective thing, but I was really bummed to see this color scheme and to see that charcoal slate on there. I thought if it had just been a tan at some version of a warmer brown tan, something like that, I thought it would have been spot on.
I have a question. Isn't America First gray?
But that's the river rock that belongs to.
It's the rock
That's
okay.
all rock, and that's specific rock that was started with the Parish Lane design guidelines. It's specific to this area, to like the creek.
Okay, so it's just the gray, the plain gray you don't like.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, it's a really dark gray, and in the like little sample versus the actual image,
yeah,
they're quite different. And I agree, Shaylin, that if we were to put the actual sample, on where they're showing the mock-up, it would be a big dark building, like a pretty dark building. Which again, I don't know that is harmonious with surrounding areas, especially that it's going to be stucco. That's the other thing too, is, using brick and stone that might have a cooler color is very different than a really dark stucco that's just a paint option, What do you guys think?
Maybe others feel differently, but I have a hard time giving my vote of approval with that gray.
What do you think, Kevin and Mason?
I think this one, for me, this is a little bit different than the Arby's gas station. I hear what you're saying on that one, that it's, we talked about that gray. But it's different. For one thing, it's not, and as I go through and I look at the elevations, this one's not on, it's not on one of the elevations that's really like prominent as an entrance point to the city, right? Like it's not, we're talking about and I'm pulling it back up again here.
The north and the east.
We're talking about the north and the east. This certainly doesn't say welcome to Centerville as far as that goes. So that's why for me, it doesn't play in as much as the others do. It doesn't give me as much heartburn on it as maybe the Arby's does, because that was like a big chunk of what they were doing.
But what do you think about this severely dark color of it? Like, because if you're looking in the actual mock-up, their side color is the same color as the sidewalk. I mean, their stucco is showing the same color as the sidewalk, which is not accurate. So this mock-up is actually pretty inaccurate, because that would be that stucco would have to be many, many, many shades lighter if it's really.
I hear what you're saying again there. I know what you're saying, that it's going to be pretty dark, but I do still think that it's going to be harmonious. And I know that I was looking at pictures of the area here while you guys were talking earlier, so I can't remember whether it was you, Becky, or Shaylin. I was talking about how this is a different building than the MTC building, but to me, it feels like it'll be harmonious with the MTC building. And really, other than, like Corey pointed out, the In-N-Out, that's the only other building in the area that's, well, the dentist office, but there's not that many buildings in this specific.
And Chick-fil-A.
And McDonald's.
But did we do McDonald's and Chick-fil-A according to the Paris Lane guidelines?
Doesn't matter. They fit within that design guideline. And if you just look a little bit to the east, then you're really into that color scheme. I mean, look, if I'm building a building from a commercial standpoint, I want my building to stand out. Of course, I want my building to stand out. I want everybody to see my building. And I suspect that that's a lot of the reason that they put in that dark gray. The question is that harmonious with the surrounding areas? And I can't quite get on board. That's a really dark gray. And I'm with Becky. I don't think that the mock-up that they had matches the color scheme that they had for their little block, in the corner. I think that that's going to be a very, very dark building. I think it's going to stand out. And I think anybody who's coming from the north-south along that main frontage road, which you're going to get more and more and more and more traffic along there, I think it's going to be pretty stark contrast to the other things that are there. That's just my opinion.
Would you prefer if they did the lighter one? Or do you not want gray at all?
I would like it better, but I still question whether it's harmonious in my personal aesthetic.
I think a muted color that is a little bit cool would be harmonious still in my mind. It's not that I don't think that it has to be warm. I don't feel like we're a strict like Park City that we have like a very specific color palette, but I do think, and I also think that generally styles and trends right now are tending to go a little bit more cooler than warmer in past. So that might even just be a function of like what buildings were built a little bit earlier versus later. So I'm not as concerned if it's like definitely on the warm spectrum. However, I do think that the extreme dark cool would be more egregious than extremely dark warm. Does that make sense? Because that to me wouldn't really, I think that's so far past what the current neighboring buildings look like. So I would either I'd be really happy with either a lighter cool color, or if they really wanted it to be darker, maybe just in that warmer area. I don't
Something
know.
equivalent to like the McDonald's. If you think about the McDonald's, they have some strong, darker, warm stucco elements on it. And I think that it fits in really well in that area. Corey has popped up. Corey?
I'm just going to give you a design element to it. I know it's a matter of taste. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Personally, if you're going to stay into the cool tone areas, you have a richer look with the contrast with the rock, the darker you go. So the lighter you go, that rock's going to wash and it's not going to look as nice.
Mm.
And so I'm concerned that if you go down to the road to lighten up that gray, now Orlando comes from a firm, so maybe he can weigh in. But I think the darker ends create that balance of richness with that rock. Otherwise, you're going to wash that building away with the gray and the white.
I wouldn't have any problem whatsoever if it was a darker, warm color. Again, I think that it matches the McDonald's that's already over there. It's the cool dark that is causing me pause.
Right. I just think with all that white, that darker cool with the rock is going to make that architecturally look nicer than trying to lighten it up. But that's my taste. Orlando could weigh in because I'm a planner, not an architect.
Well,
What-
I'd love to hear from Christina and Mason. I mean, I'm a pretty opinionated person when it comes to aesthetics.
So from my perspective, it's a close call. I could be swayed that it's harmonious. I'm persuaded, Shaylin, by your perspective that it's not. My question more is just for practicalities, and I'd love to hear from Orlando, Madam Chair, when you're ready, about what kind of color palettes they've used in other areas that have had design standards like this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't want to invite the applicant forward if I was in the clear minority on this one. Christina?
Personally, I'm a cool color person. I don't like the warm colors. So I like the dark gray, but
Okay.
That's just, like I said, that's just me. I'm a cool, I like the cool tones, but personal opinion,
Fair enough.
Well, and the cool tones, the other thing that's kind of tricky with this project is they have that metal that's kind of part of it too. And so I think at some point we can, invite Orlando to have more of a say. I'm not a designer, but I'm guessing that the metal with a warm tone would sort of clash a little bit. So, and I agree also with Corey that if you lighten up and make it like, a really light color, it's not going to pop against these other things. But I wonder if there's like some middle ground where it can be like slightly warmer, but still in the cool area, and slightly lighter but not so light that it washes it out. I don't know, just something that's a little bit less intense than that really dark charcoal.
Yeah, let's go ahead and invite the applicant to come back and address this issue. Obviously, it's one that we care passionately about. So, Mr. Taylor, we'd love to hear from you. How have you addressed this situation with regard to design guidelines in other communities? Is there a way that you can tweak this color palette to resolve some of the concerns that you're hearing?
Absolutely. We can tweak it to satisfy the warmer, cooler, darker tones. What we've done in the past, we've actually taken this concept as a new prototype that we're trying to introduce. And like I mentioned before, the contemporary color and contemporary flow to somewhat not overpower the surrounding areas, but at the same time try to keep some level of continuity with the materials that are selected. The contrast is one big one. We don't want to have too many of the lighter material palettes because it would definitely wash out, but definitely something that would give a high level of contrast. Now, what we can do, we can certainly submit a different color palette, if you will, if that is something that would be open and be acceptable. But that was really our intent, trying to come up with some newer color scheme that would fit closely into the surrounding areas with the stone and the darker versus the lighter. But we're open to possibly submit a lighter palette, if you will.
Also,
Very helpful.
we
And
want to-
sorry, Becky, I think we're the two most opinionated ones when it comes to the color issue. As between the two, going lighter and warmer, or darker and lighter and cooler, or darker and warmer, which would you fall on that spectrum?
I'm fine with whatever. I just think there needs to be a little bit of the tweak of that charcoal. And I would sort of turn that over to Mr. Taylor to, do his business. I'm not going to be too opinionated as far as like exactly which way, but I just think that dark charcoal doesn't sit with the surrounding areas. And I would say too, it would be extremely helpful if we could see the actual, like that mock-up from my comments. Like I said
Sure.
before, the mock-up is showing the wall the same as the sidewalk, which that's not possibly the dark charcoal, unless the dark charcoal is wrong. And in that
No,
case,
I totally understand.
concerned, so I would like to see the mock-up actually with the color that is supposed to be that that main stucco color.
Absolutely. We certainly can tweak that to get a better looking feel of what the actual would be. Sometimes these renderings, when we present those in the sun and light, it definitely cast a different look. That wasn't the intent, but we can certainly accommodate that if that's being requested.
So can I throw out kind of a thing here? And this is for the other commissioners more than it is for the applicant. Maybe I'm in the minority here about, I feel like we're in the ballpark. I want to be sensitive to the applicant's timing. So how would we feel about allowing staff to review an amended color palette versus having the applicant have to come back to us at some future date?
That was actually going to be my recommendation, because I feel like staff knows what we're aiming for here. And obviously Mr. Taylor is the expert in this, and so he knows what we're aiming for. And so I think the two of them could come together, and I feel comfortable.
That's why I quickly faced in on that. There's a couple of ways that you could to handle that. I mean, I think you have a good point on the timing, Commissioner Daly, on moving them forward. They still have to go to the RDA for a final, and the RDA calls out the Parish Lane Design Guidelines as a part of it too. And I think that's something that we could handle. One way is a recommendation that the colors be modified and bumped up to the RDA for final approval and let them weigh in under their redevelopment. That's one way of handling it. The other way of handling it is giving them approval, but that we come back rather than an amendment, we just come back to formalize the final colors and let them proceed with their construction permits, because they don't need the final color selection while they're, doing their construction plans for improvement. So we could bring back the color palette for sanction by the commission at a later date without too much hiccup to the timeline. Orlando,
So-
you can weigh in.
In that case, I'm okay with either one of those approaches.
Yeah, and I am going to advocate for the second approach, just because I think that what constitutes a harmonious color palette with the surrounding area really is fundamentally something that should be made by the Planning Commission rather than staff. I love you, staff. I think you guys are great. But that one is one that I think really needs to be with the Planning Commission. But I love the idea of letting them move forward with the other aspects of it and just coming back with regards to the color palette.
Yes, because if Orlando brought fuchsia in, I'd probably say, okay.
Oh, man, let me get it. Well, no, I appreciate that. And we certainly, I appreciate that. And we certainly can tweak that. And that was going to be one of my concerns, really. All the while, we've been trying to strive to keep this project moving forward and do all the necessary things that's been asked of us. Also, even with the UDOT expansion, trying to accommodate that for future 2 years plus down the road. We quite are unsure of when that was going to take place, but we wanted to at least be mindful and considerate of that and keep in mind the Parish Lane guidelines as well. If it's a matter of just the colors, we certainly can tweak those to everyone's agreement. But we would definitely appreciate the approval to continue with construction documents. The colors are something that we certainly can modify and tweak for everyone's approval. So we would definitely ask the approval to move forward.
Corey, if we were to modify your proposed motion that you've made here to include that, will you draft me a bullet point 8 on this? What language did you propose here to say that we move to approve it and then make a condition number 8?
Yeah, that the final color scheme be approved by the commission prior to issuance of the building permit. And then we would just schedule that for a meeting quickly for you to see it, debate it, and give an answer.
Okay. I'm very comfortable with that approach. Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. We appreciate you and our staff. Okay, so any further discussion or debate on this one? No? Okay, seeing no further debate, I will go ahead and I'll make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan application submitted by Deerwood Investments Utah LLC for the proposed Bank of America development located at 782 West Lane, AKA the former Iggy's Restaurant, subject to conditions 1 through 7 in the staff report, with an added 8th condition that the final color scheme will be approved by the Planning Commission prior to the issuance of a building permit, and for suggested reasons A through C in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate?
I thought that we wanted to continue to let them have their building permit.
Right.
Did
Well,
Corey say with the issuance of a?
Corey said prior to the issuance of the building
Yeah,
permit.
we would bring it back to you. I mean, they've got a little bit of work between now.
So they still have stuff to do.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Further discussion or debate on this? If not, we'll do this in reverse order, starting with you, Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. All right, thank you very much. We appreciate the applicants on this one. And I look forward to seeing the new color schemes. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving to the third item on our agenda. This one is a conceptual site plan for Extreme Auto. So we'll turn the time over to staff.
I'm trying to share the site plan here. Bring that up. I have a teeny little screen. Okay, hopefully you see that. And I'm audio, okay, we're clear. There's a number of issues to be discussed and give direction to the applicant. This is an opportunity for you to conceptually look at their proposal and give them some feedback. Staff has provided you 2 motions to consider, and I'll kind of describe where we're at. This is in our industrial high zone, and this would be just north of the Parish Lane ramp on our west side. I think Mr. J.D. Taylor Contractors had operated out of this site for a number of years. I think I bring up in the staff report that this parcel has been somewhat operated prior to the city doing the planning. It looks like the records go back to the 70s, in which the county was doing the planning and the approval process. And we do not have those much of those archived records from the county during that time period. And so we're in a situation that when you look at a site plan and they want to change it, and it was developed before the current ordinances are in place, you look back at that original site plan, and if it's in compliance with that original site plan, then it's deemed compliance with the new parameters, so long as they don't exceed certain levels of changes. And we're unable to verify what that original approval looked like. We're pretty sure from our records that there's a number of elements that have occurred on the property that were not likely a part of that final approval. The example is that we do not have records that the parking out front is approved. Backing onto a city street is not permitted, and it doesn't look like the infrastructure of its original approval allowed the backing onto the street. That's not saying it didn't. It's just that we can't find evidence that that would have approved that way. The second item is you see the number of vehicles and equipment on the property. Yes, some of them probably were historically involved with the Taylor contractor and the various uses there. But the actual point, we've counted from the aerial 75 vehicles, in addition to there is some other equipment that's stored on the property, and those items would be violations of our code and likely violations of the past. And so I think we have a situation here where we have a positive effort by the applicant to reuse the site, but we have some problematic code elements to overcome to reuse that site. So the first item and position staff took is that, and we listed it in the enforcement section of the staff report, there's an obligation that if there are violations of the property that they need to be fixed in order to obtain approvals, or they need to be conditioned to be fixed with any approvals. And that brings up the point is if the applicant or property owner wants to make an argument that some of this claims that we've made in the staff report are part of a prior approval, it would take their effort to go to the Board of Adjustment and provide the evidence to declare any of this concerns to be legal with an original approval. However, to date, Mr. Manning wants to occupy a portion of the property, from our understanding, and relocate his business. It involves auto repair and it involves the sale of a vehicle. Auto repair is a permitted use in this zone. Vehicle sales is a conditional use in this zone. And so staff looked at, there's two components. One, we need to fix the violations. And so we've listed in our conceptual discussion to the commission, the applicant needs to provide a remediation plan for these violations if they're not going through the process to claim that it's part of an original approval. The other element is to come into play is that there's a considerable effort to clean up the property, remodel the buildings, readapt those uses. And from our standpoint in the staff and the code, we do not have any non-conforming uses to deal with because both of those uses are allowed in some form or fashion. We don't really have a non-conforming structure because it doesn't violate any setbacks of the IH zone. But we do have the issue of parking and landscaping that are not in compliance. And so we believe that the reuse of this building, getting a new certificate of occupancy for those uses, that it meets the third criteria that the parking and landscaping need to comply with today's ordinances in order to introduce the new uses. And so that was the primary focus of the staff report is what does it take to comply with today's standards. As to the issue of parking, I believe that for the most part, they are providing sufficient parking in the number of count of stalls for the uses. Now I say that partially because we understand that vehicle repair and vehicle sales are intended for the property. But the applicant also brings up that they would like to develop this in 2 different phases. And so we're not clear from our standpoint, are there other uses in the future being introduced, or are there existing uses present? Now, we don't have any licensed businesses licensed out of here, so we don't have any recognized uses for the property. But we need to take into account all of the uses, even if it's being developed in different phases. We need to understand what are all the anticipated uses so we can ensure the required parking count for all of the uses. It looks like they've got a large area, so they'll probably be able to satisfy that. The second component is the landscaping. The applicants indicated that in their site plan that they will upgrade the landscaping along the street frontage. They'll provide some additional landscape. I think they have some landscaping in the front of the building, according to our ordinances. They have a big landscaped area on the southern end on their site plan that they plan to put in. But it also indicates that they would like to do the xeriscaping style. And there's a difference between drought tolerant and xeriscaping. Drought tolerant style is you can do plantings that reduce the amount of watering, but it's still, there's certain percentage counts that the ultimate plants have to reach a certain coverage, 75% of your landscaped area, in order to qualify as drought tolerant or traditional landscaping. If you go to xeriscape, xeriscape is a native planting, usually established by initial irrigation, but the plant coverage is much, much less. You'll see much more mulching with rock, bark, and much less plant material. But our ordinance still requires the planting of trees. So we took the position of their application that they'd like to do a xeriscape plan. And a xeriscape plan does have to be done by somebody who has xeriscape experience. So we address that issue that we need to find an architect who has xeriscape experience if they're going to go that route. If they don't want to go xeriscape and go back to the drought tolerant, then we'll see much more plantings taking place, but they will be species that use a less need for watering. So an example, instead of doing a Kentucky bluegrass, you would do a buffalo grass or something that requires less watering and less mowing and still qualify as traditional landscaping. So we bring that issue up in the report. The third issue we bring up in the report is that phasing plan. We'd like to see the total site, the types of uses. We need to make sure that the drainage infrastructure for the area functions for the whole site. Likely the drainage infrastructure needs to go in with the first phase, not the second phase. And we just like some greater clarity on the phasing as far as uses, installation of landscaping, and then this whole issue of cleaning up the violations. They include how, when, what, where, and why the violations. One of the concerns that we have at staff is that if we clean up a portion of the violations and then business use is allowed to occur, there's a tendency to push the rest of the material away into a second phase. And we don't have any plans or commitments to eliminate those violations and upgrade that property. So we just like to see better clarity with the phasing, the ultimate plan of uses for the parking, and then improve the commitment to what type of landscaping is taking place. So we give you a view of the site. We're not starting from raw ground. And so we can accommodate bumping that to final site plan. But also Mr. Manning is, from our conversations with him, is a little bit under duress in timing to be able to move his operation from a site in Centerville to this site. And so we're trying to balance that need between getting the information and correcting the violations versus allowing him to move forward to speed up the timing of rehabilitating this site, because we do think it's a positive thing that somebody wants to come in and reuse this site and clean this up. So we're from staff, we're trying to be a little flexible that way when we provide that second recommendation to you. So unless you have specifics, I'm going to leave it at that.
Thanks, Corey. One question for you on the staff report. You have two options, option 1 and option 2, both recommend tabling. I assume that the second option is it's supposed to read to approve.
No, you caught my spelling error. Yeah, it was to approve.
Okay, I assumed as much. Any questions for staff? If not, we will invite the applicant to join us via Zoom. Great, if you'll just introduce yourself for the record.
Yep, my name is Justin Manning, business owner of two businesses here in Centerville, and I reside in Farmington.
Great. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there anything in the staff report that causes you concern? I mean, there's a lot on this site, so.
So, Mr. Manning, I know that Corey alluded to the fact that there were some things that maybe you had anticipated already being approved by previous site plans, and then some things that are not in compliance currently. Do you want to address that, or talk about kind of what steps you're taking, or what you foresee doing there?
Okay, so yeah, let me just kind of give you, and I appreciate Corey. I think he hit it, spot on. We scheduled numerous DRC meetings, or 3 DRC meetings, to try to say, okay, here's where I'm at, here's what my plans are, and that's that. In the DRC meetings, it keeps changing around as far as we want to make sure that things are coming in line. So things that I didn't know and whatnot, but so my businesses. So the scenario is current landlord Merrill Sheriff, and over the past few years. And I have always been on the outs because he cannot provide the parking that I need, and which causes stress and duress on the other tenants in the property. And so come February of this year, it got to the point where it's like, I need to do something. And Jed Taylor, who's the owner of the property, he knows it's long past time to clean up and to do and to retire. And so I started the conversations with him. And from a business standpoint, it keeps me from moving too far away from where my existing clientele knows where I'm located. And then it does have the parking that will suffice for us, and the building space for that. So now, if you wouldn't mind repeating your question, now that I kind of went on just a little bit.
No, that's great. I just gonna see if you have a plan for addressing some of the issues that Corey was mentioning that are not in compliance right now, and what that plan looks like.
Okay. So to kind of give you a scope of the project, and when I was in a DRC meeting recently, and they pulled up that same view from Google Earth of of everything everywhere, and from my perspective, we probably had about 25 dump truck loads removed from there. There's about 30 vehicles that have already been removed from there. So that current image is not accurate, but when I made the comment to staff to, hey, have you driven by? And I had to catch myself the next meeting, because inside the buildings were full of stuff. And so just in a matter of trying to organize and to make things, to move things forward. So there's some things that have moved from inside the building, outside, vehicles being moved and whatnot. There were, along the front of that picture, there was every single one of those vehicles had been sitting for about a decade at least. And so just as I've been working with Jed to try to clean things up, but we had to put a fuel pump in every single one of those trucks or vehicles to get them running, just because they've been sitting there so long. So to kind of maybe personalize it just a little bit. So Jed recognizes that yes, there is a mess over there. There are hoarding tendencies that go along with this. So as he's working through this process as well, he's more and more aware of, okay, this is what we need to do, but I'm being conscientious that he's not only cleaning up his life's work essentially, and he's going through a lot of things that go along with this scenario. So so he does recognize things need to continue to move. And so a couple of things that are putting the pressure on moving it forward, and I'm having to help organize everything that's going on to keep things going. So that he knows that I need the parking over here. We can't have these things over here. So the site plan, or to finish answering that question, starting tomorrow, I've got 17 more vehicles that are going to be hauled out of there to tear apart. So anything and everything that we're doing is recycling or selling, or Jed's given a lot of things away, and just it. If I were to go back to February and February, March, April and say, if I knew I was getting into with all of this, would I have said, yeah, I'm going to do that? It's like, oh no, I would have found another building that's a lot less stressful. But that being said, there is a pathway that is occurring over there, including in all of those. The main scenarios are that we are working to clear everything out of there. So cleanup is where it's at. For my business image, it has to occur. I can't have that. And the other obstacles that we've been working with staff and whatnot are we've got a metal building. Okay, not the most desirable type of a building, and so we're looking at what can we do to enhance the aesthetics of this building and to just make it so not only clean up but make it nice. And again, from my business perspective, I've got to have things look nice, presentable. So we have we average 2 to 3 new customers a day coming into my business. I've got to present that well. So staff has been very helpful with going through some different options, because the building was built so long ago when the county was involved, and we started with backing out, saying, okay, that can't happen. So we've come up with what I feel is something that could be very workable. So there's your long answer for that initial question. So any other questions?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the applicant?
So I have a question for you. In terms of site phasing, this is the concern I have most. Do you have a current site phasing plan?
Yes, and I did present that to staff, so I think Corey's going to pull that up. So here's the scenarios that I'm learning and that are playing out in here. Is that, so I am under a time crunch. So I was in 7 units of Merrill Sheriff's, and for him, it's like, okay, well, I'm phasing out. So now I'm down to 5. So my team is all crunching up, and everything is kind of being constricted. So two things for phasing that came up. One is that there is a very, very real way that we could do the phase 1 that I presented, that I could start operating after. Obviously there's permits, there's other things that need to be done as well, but where we could start operating. So just so you know, with Merrill Sheriff, the last 4 units I've got to exit by the end of November. So I've got some timing that I can operate out of 2 locations, but the constraint of the sheer volume of cleanup that is going on and continuing to go on every day is one factor for the phasing request. And then the other factor is that, as I've visited with staff, there is, and they'll go over it, there's a city storm drain that comes underneath I-15 down the north side of the property that they want to replace. And currently, with all of the stuff back there, you can't get to it. So these are things that are actually expediting some cleanup back there. And the 17 vehicles that are going to be leaving over the next few days are all in the back of that property, with one that was just pulled around and whatnot. So that current Google view is not accurate to the current site. It's still a mess, don't get me wrong, but the number of vehicles on there is not accurate to where we're at right now.
Right, and my question is I feel like your answer is phased more towards the phasing of how your business operations are going to proceed. My question is specifically, how are the improvements going to be phased in such a way that they each independently stand on their own and will thus be in compliance with our local ordinance?
Yeah, so that's where the site plan that he'll pull up and whatnot. So it's like we're looking at the whole site plan. This with water retention and landscaping and everything. So here's the whole plan. And so we're taking a look at the whole plan and saying, yeah, there's some details that'll need to be worked out. But if we take a look at the whole plan, we're proceeding with the whole plan. And so the phasing aspect of it is basically just, I don't know if Corey has that. Doesn't look like it's on that one. It was one of the initial ones I put in, is basically just getting the retention going, the waterways or underground water storm drain that we're retending on the grounds, and proceeding with the landscaping within that phase, and then that continuing to just proceed as things get cleaned up.
I don't have that original. I don't know if that was sent to McKinsey, but I just got what your engineer sent to me. So
gotcha. Yeah, and that was an initial one, and so it essentially is the larger of the two buildings. The buildings are conjoined. There's no going into either building. So that larger building being standalone with the things that I have in there for you to review as far as the visuals and the signage and everything else in there. And then the asphalt on the south side and the landscaping in front of the buildings with what staff and I feel like is a good, well, I don't know if they feel like it's a good solution. I feel like it's a good solution that they brought up for the front of the building, so we're not backing out on the street. So, so that's kind of a quick snapshot, verbally, of what we're intending. But intending to, take a look at the whole project. And as far as the approval and that's what, and Steve from Bingham Engineering is on here with us, and he's been helping with the whole site plan and engineering the water retention and all of that. So.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll ask you to go ahead and mute your video. This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to, no, I lied.
It
Was it-
has been scheduled for a public meeting. It just doesn't say it on the
It just
agenda.
didn't make it on the staff report. Sorry, I got thinking, wow, really? Okay, this matter has been scheduled. I indicated scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to step forward and join us via video. And I'll pause for a moment to allow anybody. We don't have very many participants on line. And seeing no one coming forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any other questions for staff? Further discussion and debate?
My primary concern, as I indicated previously, is phasing. To perhaps rely too heavily on an old saying, failure to plan is a plan to fail. The problem with failure to have an independent and adequately supported phasing plan, in my eyes, is that if at whatever point we find that one of the phases doesn't stand on its own in terms of all of its improvements, landscaping, parking, stormwater management, and if at some point the project fails or has to stall, then it becomes much more of a headache, not only for the owner of the property, but for staff and any enforcement mechanism that needs to happen with it, not to mention issues with the public. So I would say that this is unripe in my eyes for an approval. And therefore, without a development phasing plan that is each independent, I would not be inclined to vote in favor.
Lisa has popped up. Lisa?
Sure, yeah, if I can just respond to that. Staff certainly shares your concern. There's obviously a lot of complicating factors on this. As the applicant has mentioned, we've had 3 different development review committee meetings with the applicant to address a lot of the nonconformities and bringing the site into conformity, and as well as the drainage and the phasing plan. But at this point, this is a conceptual site plan. So I just wanted to highlight the ordinance requirements at the conceptual site plan. The conceptual site plan requires regarding phasing that the application just shows a development schedule indicating approximate date when the construction or stages can be expected to begin and completed. So that's really all our ordinance requires at this stage. What staff is saying, we're just trying to highlight there are a lot of problems. And so, you know, before final, certainly, typically the phasing plan we like to see and understand. So I think we're just highlighting that, but it's actually not required at conceptual.
That's a really good point, Lisa. Thank you.
I appreciate that clarification, Lisa, because I was thinking the same thing, Mason, and I'm not sure that the applicant answered your question with regard to phasing. So hopefully staff can work with the applicant to help them understand what it means by phasing.
Yeah, and I think just to weigh in on that, you know, obviously there's a lot of issues here with this site. And so I think with the conditions, we're saying, hey, have they submitted enough at conceptual to move on, or do we even want to see more and table it? Or do we want to just go with what's required in the ordinance and say that they certainly have a lot of work to do to bring back final?
Yeah, this one is hard from a policy standpoint because they have an applicant who is coming in and they want to improve this property, right? I mean, they want to make property compliant, which I very much appreciate and I want to work with. And I also recognize that they have some timing considerations and I certainly don't want to be a fly in that ointment, but I shared your concerns, Mason.
So I'm going to give a differing opinion. I know obviously from what we've seen, from what the applicant talked about and what staff has mentioned in the report and in discussing with us, there obviously are there are going to be some issues with this. I also share what Lisa was saying, that, and what we've done in the past as a commission is, you know, tried to err on the side of, is this following the requirements in the code, which are what she outlined, and then are we going to allow the property owner or the, you know, applicant to continue moving forward? I would hate to be the kink in the chain that makes it so that this project doesn't continue. I mean, there's enough already, it seems like, that this applicant is up against, but he has shown us, you know, that initial rendering and that plan, and he seems to be very interested in getting there. Also, with the external deadlines that I think are in place, that have been mentioned with the water drainage thing and some other external deadlines, I actually feel like, even though there's a lot going on, I feel like, oh, that's actually probably better than not having some of those, you know, things to push and keep that project moving along. So I would pull Logan right here and just say, I say we approve it and let the applicant know all of the things that are required, which I'm, you know, under the impression the applicant is very aware of what is all the things that need to happen. But that we make sure that our conditions are very clear and that the applicant has that momentum to keep moving forward.
I actually don't disagree with you. I'm inclined to approve it. I was with Mason initially until Lisa clarified the provisions. I initially had the same concerns that Mason did.
And I'm gonna add to that. I agree. I think Lisa helped remind me, which was very helpful, that this is conceptual. For some reason, I was looking at it through a more final lens, and I ought not have been. So I'm inclined to not table it anymore, but to approve it on those conditions. With, of course, the alert that if it comes back to us and there is even more pressure and even more stress because there's such a short deadline and it comes back to us and it's not complete or it's not satisfactory at the final stage, I'm less inclined to approve at that point. I am sensitive to the deadlines, but deadlines under these kind of situations in my very limited experience, create a motive to cut corners, and I don't want to do that.
That's a good point. I like that.
Any further discussion or debate on this one? Seeing a shaking head, at least one shaking head. Okay, with that then, the chair will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the conceptual site plan that has been submitted on this application, and it addressed the items identified in the staff report. If it's okay, I'm not going to read them.
That's fine.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? We'll do this. Sorry, my video is switched around because I've moved off, and so now you just have to listen. I like to shake it up, guys, just to keep you on your toes. So we'll start with you, Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr. And I am an aye as well. Guys, I miss being able to do this in person. Zoom is fun, but I like having a set order. So, all right, the motion passes, the conceptual is granted, and the applicant can move forward and continue working with the city on this one. All right, moving to the last item on our agenda. This is the Planning Commission minutes from July 22nd. We'll do this as we normally do, page by page. Let me know if you have any changes, starting with page 1.
Yeah, I had one on page 1. Sorry. I'll get back to it. So I did the prayer and legislative thought, or no, legislative prayer and thought, not the Pledge of Allegiance.
True.
Line 34.
I don't think we usually identify who does the Pledge of Allegiance. So
I don't
maybe
think we do.
just need to
I don't
change
think we
that
do either.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thought or prayer. Good catch. I did not catch that. Anything else on page 1? Page 2. Page 3. Chair will entertain a motion.
Go, Kevin.
I move that we, what are we doing? Approving the minutes as amended for the July 22nd Planning Commission meeting.
I second.
That's pretty much 2020. Yep. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? No. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, they're approved. And I move that we.
Wait. Are we?
We have the Community Development Director's report.
Oh, I am so sorry. I did.
I thought you were going to go back to that, so I didn't bug you on it.
Guys, I apologize. This is the first time, literally, I think in the entire time that I've been on Planning Commission that I haven't printed my report. So I've been over here trying to scroll and I don't like it. I'm an old paper and pen kind of gal. And so I'm clicking through my link. Sorry, Corey, I didn't mean to skip you.
No offense. I'm as eager as you to go as fast and slow as you want to go. No, just a real quick, Mr. Bell asked for a delay in his application, so that's scheduled for next council meeting next Tuesday for his rezone. I did give you, I think we have 3 items coming up. I bumped the residential buffering from this agenda because we had a number of items, and it's rescheduled for your next meeting, so we'll include that. So I think we have a rezone, we have the residential buffering, and I think the Parish Creek PDO amendments are coming back to you for your next meeting. And then this time I only put on the couple of goals mentioning we're doing the residential buffering and starting in September at least, coming to you with the preliminary ideas on the transportation element, since we kind of sorted. I can come back with the broader goals, but I just thought we'll just narrow it down to where we go start getting things checked off. And so I plan to come to you starting in September, because I've got a notice that we're intending to amend the general plan, which is a whole different type of notice that you have to do. So I'll probably come back in your first meeting in September to start the transportation element. So with that, we'll get 2 tasks underway.
Awesome.
Excellent work. I like it.
Can I
Okay.
ask for an update on the Hive? Do you know anything that's happened past what we have done with them?
Yeah, they've been in negotiations with the property owner, and there have been some mediation efforts taken on their part in some of the disputes that were going on. I don't know the intricate details, just the high level details, that there are some disputes. I know that the developers reached out to the mayor and wants to meet with the mayor. They believe that they have some preliminary ideas, because the mayor has been, how do you say this, nice but poignant? The mayor's been a thorn in their side? No, he's not. The mayor has been in constant communication, concerned about the welfare of those in the park, and they want to go over what they think they have as a plan for helping the residents in that park. So don't know the details of that, but I have talked with them on the timeline. They would like to resubmit for a plan development overlay for the property that does a mixed use concept. And so we've been in discussions on the timeline of applications that they would take to accomplish that. So they would, if they submit that, they're putting a delay on the other request and seeing how this second request goes.
Thank you for that update.
All right. Have I missed anything else? No.
I just wanted to give a brief update. I attended a land use task force meeting this week. It's just a bunch of city attorneys and planners and other representatives that get together to talk about legislation that the private property rights coalition wants to push forward for legislation for the next legislative session. But there were a couple things that I thought were interesting. One thing that the property rights side, which is basically developers and real estate folks, but they are talking about potentially having some mandatory training for planning commissioners, and they're proposing up to 4 hours per year. I just always kind of like to stay ahead of the curve. So I'm thinking, I think that's kind of a nice goal, maybe, that we think about, that as a planning commission, we get at least 2 to 4 hours of training per year. I know this year that was one of our goals, is to do more training. And so we can kind of get back on that track. And then the other thing that they talked about was conditional use permits. There's certainly been a lot of developing case law out of Moab and others. And I just think, based on that discussion and some of my other concerns in our most recent CUPs, is I really think we need to bring some ordinance amendments. The PRC's request is to make it more of a requirement that any CUP conditions or standards be objective standards. But I mean, in my opinion, I think they should be objective standards anyway. We were kind of talking about harmonious, and they were talking about the concerns with, aesthetics and things at the conditional use permit phase. So anyway, I think Corey and I will be working on some amendments to our CUP ordinance to try and get ahead of the curve on that as well. And well, actually just getting up to speed. So we'll just try to fit that in as we can. So yeah, it was interesting discussion. There's always new legislation, but that's kind of what's on their radar. And Mason and Shaylin, we can talk about standard of review. They want to change that as well, but that's not really interesting for other people.
Lisa, I am more than happy to work with you on putting together color schemes right into the code. We can pick the colors, we can do a color palette, and we'll say, these are the ones, pick.
Okay.
They're putting a quick quack in West Bountiful.
Yes, and it's not going to look as pretty as ours, I bet.
No.
We have a really good looking quick crack car wash.
Yep.
Corey, you knew that I was going to raise that issue. You knew it was coming from me.
I That's why I said you didn't let me down.
Nope. All right. Very opinionated on stuff like that. All right. Hey,
No one on this commission is opinionated, Sharon. Are you kidding me?
hey, I appreciate everyone. I hope that everyone is staying healthy and safe, and we'll meet again at our next planning commission meeting. So I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. See everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Good job.